1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to The Author Has Thoughts, my commentary on my own works. I am Gary Ballard, the author in question, author of the Cyberpunk series Bridge Chronicles, as well as the series of novellas based on Cthulhu Mythos called the Stepping Stone Cycle. If you saw my first video, the zero episode as it were, I probably recorded that about 2 months ago. And since then I've had to bury a dog, unfortunately, and I've had to live through a pretty nasty little sinus infection that didn't really knock me out, but it just kept me coughing all the time. So if I cough during this one, I'll try to cut out as much of those as I can. But if I don't, I apologize. I'm still getting over it. Cough's still hanging around the chest. I've got some new lights donated to me by a lady in the neighborhood who apparently did not need them anymore, and a little pop filter. So hopefully you don't hear as much of my smacking when I stop and change and do that kind of thing. We're going to delve into first of my books in the Stepping Stone Cycle series called First Stone. Yeah, not really original. Color beige filled the entirety of his vision. All beige, a bland colorlessness. No, not all, not everything. There, tiny spot just out of reach. Mold? What is mold? Stain? Is that a stain? Tiny, not even as big as his fingernail. Raise his hand to compare the size of his fingernail to the size of that dark spot on the... Is that a wall? Fuzzy. He can't seem to find the outer bounds of his perception, only that ocean of inert beige and that tiny spot, that infinitesimal spot of darkness, that stain of moisture or age or imperfection of material. Is it a stain? Has it grown since he began looking at it? When did he begin to look at it? Why did he begin to look at it, and why can't he take his eyes off of it? Are these eyes through which he sees? Does he even see at all? Thin film seems to cover his eyes, seems to make it difficult to maintain focus on such an inconsequential detail. He cannot look away. These are his eyes. That is his hand out in front of him, comparing the size of his immaculately trimmed nail with that of the stain, that maddening stain on the sky of beige, this universe starscape of blandness corrupted by a speck of nauseating moisture. So that's the first paragraph of First Stone. Inspiration for this scene came from video game, as many video games do inspire me, out there called Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth, which is based on the Call of Cthulhu RPGs, pen and paper RPGs by Chaosium. If you're ever in the mood for a Cthulhu game, that's a great one. The game starts with the main character in an asylum in the 20s. I think it's 20s or 30s.
What I am, and of what I've always been. All that I was is now lost. Hope, purpose, pleasure, all meaningless. I now walk in the shadows between worlds, and it is there I have finally glimpsed upon what lives in the dark corners of the earth.
And, he's got writing on the wall. It's kind of the typical Cthulhu mad writing in a rubber padded room scene as you would think of, almost like Sam Neill's character in The Mouth of Madness. He's not writing on the wall, but he sees something on the wall and he's fixated on it, and he's coming out of a fugue state and he doesn't remember anything. He being the main character, Dr. Jack Carter, who is a forensic psychologist. When I first started thinking of Dr. Carter, or Jack, I was thinking he needed to be some kind of doctor or some kind of psychologist or something like that. And I wanted him to be involved with the investigation of serial killers in some way. My first thought was, all right, he's a profiler like Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs. But as I started to research that, I came to find out that character and that whole profiler thing is kind of bullshit. It doesn't necessarily exist. And I think a lot of the psychologists, the stuff that I read online, said it's bullshit because the profile is so almost stereotypical now that it doesn't really say much or help much in trying to find a person like that, because a lot of the triggers and things that we find in serial killers, yeah, they tend to be a lot of the same triggers. So almost any idiot come up with that probably. Seeing that the whole profiler thing wasn't going to work, I started to look around to see what other types of psychologists, psychiatrists works with the FBI on maybe serial killer cases or things like that. And so I stumbled upon forensic psychology. Did not know what that was, although we've seen that in many instances of television and movies. The forensic psychologist is the kind of psychologist that they bring in on legal cases when they're trying to establish fitness for trial. Is this person sane, sane enough and competent enough to understand, in the case criminal cases, to understand what they've done, why maybe it's wrong, and can they fully comprehend both what they've done but also what the trial entails? Are they competent enough to realize, oh, I'm on a trial, this could be bad for me? Can they understand what's going on? And that reaches both to criminal insanity, or it reaches to competence, like say some form of mental deficiency that doesn't allow the person to understand what's going on with them. Jack would be the kind of guy they bring in when they found some bugfuck crazy killer, serial killer, and they need to see, is he competent for a trial? Is he sane enough for a trial? Hollywood also has a fascination with the idea of temporary insanity. Most psychological experts you read on will say there's no such thing as temporary insanity. You're either insane or you're not. There may be crimes of passion and things like that, but that doesn't necessarily, in a legal definition, mean you're not liable for the crimes you commit. The idea that we would bring Jack in on these serial killer cases, and he would determine, okay, he's not insane, you can try him, or he really doesn't understand what he's done. And what happens when that occurs is the forensic psychologist usually becomes a treating psychologist or refers him to a treating psychologist. And that's where you say, well, this crazy killer, instead of getting prison, he goes to a mental hospital where he's treated there. But he's treated there for the purpose of making sure he's sane enough to be put on trial for his crimes. Jack wakes up somewhere. In this case, we find out it's a mental hospital, and he doesn't remember the last year of his life. The last thing he remembers is going on vacation with his wife Sarah. He remembers that, but nothing between that and the time when he finally wakes up. He doesn't remember, and she hasn't shown up. He is, of course, the main suspect in her disappearance. And one of the crime statistics I talk about through the series is something I've read online or heard somewhere. The victim of a murderer is generally kidnapping, generally knows their killer. It's a husband, it's a wife, it's brother, sister. It's somebody they know in their life. It's not there. There's more of that than there is drifter walks into town and kills people. Now that, of course, doesn't necessarily look with serial killers, but in this case, that's where most investigations start. They start with the people that are directly around the victim, and so of course Jack is under suspicion. So when he wakes up in that state, he does so because a janitor has come into the room and is cleaning the room and is humming or is singing, and he's got headphones on and he's singing a song. And the song that I had the janitor sing was by the Monkees.
Hey, we're the Monkees, and people say we monkey around.
Stepping Stone, I'm not your stepping stone. The janitor's singing that, and Jack starts to sing it as well in kind of a halting sense. We're going to find out later in the series that that's not the song he's singing. They just happen to match up. And that song will make more sense later on in the series. But that's where we start. This was written in 2013, as the first of this kind of series of penny dreadfuls. So it was meant to be, about 30,000 words is where I was targeting it. And I was writing it, thinking of it as a pilot for a TV series. The story just came to me in the shower, which is where I get a lot of my thoughts, either in the shower or while I'm driving or walking the dogs. I'm thinking of, there was a series that starred the guy that played Jack on Lost, whose name I cannot remember, but he was also on Party of Five. But I think it was before Lost, obviously before Lost became big, and I only saw a few episodes on Sci-Fi Channel in syndication. But it was kind of a supernatural episode. Guy, I think, what little I remember about it was the main character. His wife had died, and there was supernatural things surrounding that. So that was kind of an inspiration for it, and I was kind of looking for a hook for a story similar to that. And the Cthulhu Mythos is something I've been interested in, so I thought, well, let me marry the two, because there hasn't really been a television series just based on the Cthulhu Mythos. There's been bits and pieces of it in other things. X-Files has mentioned it. Was it Eureka, I think, had an episode where they had some H.P. Lovecraft artifacts. But there hasn't been one that's just been based on, full Lovecraft mythos. So I figured I would use that as the base of the soup, as it were. Build on that without bringing in a lot of the other, gods of the pantheon. There might be various mentions of, other gods and other elder gods or things like that. But for the most part, I wanted to keep it to Cthulhu was the base of all this, and all of this centers around him, or it, whichever you want to call it. My blog on, it's not a blog,